My name is Regina Taylor. I'm from Dallas, Texas, south of the Trinity River. I went here to Southern Methodist University and graduated in '81. It's a pleasure to return here at this moment in time. It is a challenge, it is a mission to be here at this moment, working on the Black Album mixtape. Working on the Black Album started as a conversation I was having with SMU about how do we continue to create, how do we continue to teach in this time of COVID isolation. It was then to write a play called The Black Album Resistance that was presented this fall, 2020, with African American students of Meadows, touching upon the subjects of identity, race, politics, of, of COVID-19. All these things were erupting all at the same time, and I felt that people needed to speak on it, to give voice to it. The Black Album mixtape is an invitation to share what's on your mind, to think about how we got here, where we are right now, and to imagine better outcomes for tomorrow from here. It is an invitation then for people across the board from different mediums, fields, backgrounds to share. It is a platform to speak because we can't be silent right now. Black bone china. These are one of a kind. They are unique. They are created by Southern Methodist University students in the ceramics shop. I love each and every one of them. They speak to how do you feel about the current state that we're in? How do you feel about others in this world? They are unique expressions of self and the world around. The challenge in all of this is to stay connected. How do you, without being in the same space, sharing the same breath, how do you share who you are? How do you reach, touch another human being? It is the challenge in this present moment. The Black Bone China Dinners, food for thought. They are gatherings in virtual space. How do we connect to each other? How do we continue to share our ideas and share our souls with each other? In this gathering, we have people in different cities, this virtual dinner, and we ask each one to provide their favorite restaurant. And we'll provide then a blackened menu, serving the theme from the plates to the food of identity and of the richness and complexity in terms of identity and being Black in this country in this moment in time. It's a springboard for so many subjects. Each person around the table are uniquely, holistically individual challengers of the universe and its status quo. They are innovative, they are creative, they are passionate, they believe in social justice, they believe in people and how we share ideas, how we move communities. They are cutting edge, they are ahead of the pack, and they are fascinating.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's Food for Thought virtual dinner, a discussion over dessert on arts, activism, and technology. I'm Dr. Gretchen Smith, and I serve as chair of the Division of Theater of Southern Methodist University. Tonight's discussion is part of a series of events that celebrate the launch of the Black Album mixtape, a project conceived and curated by Meadows' distinguished visiting artist, Regina Taylor, in partnership with SMU and the Division of Theater. We are delighted to be joined this evening by Ms. Taylor and other influential leaders in the theater world. Robert Barry Fleming is the Executive Artistic Director of Actors Theater of Louisville. Fleming previously served as Associate Artistic Director at Cleveland Playhouse and as Director of Artistic Programming at Arena Stage. World premieres commissioned, developed, and championed during his tenure at Arena include the 2017 Best Musical Tony Award winner, Dear Evan Hansen, and the 2017 Pulitzer Prize winner, Sweat by Lynn Nottage. Nataki Garrett is Oregon Shakespeare Festival's 6th artistic director. Prior to her appointment at OSF, Garrett served as the acting artistic director for the Denver Center for the Performing Arts Theater Company. Garrett is the recipient of the first ever Ammerman Prize for directing given by Arena Stage. She also received the National Endowment for the Arts and Theater Communications Group Career Development Fellowship for Theater Directors. She is a member of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society and a member of the Board of Directors for Theater Communications Group, a company member at Woolly Mammoth, and an advisory board member for Mixed Blood Theater. Jonathan McCrory is a 2 Obie Award-winning Harlem-based artist who has served as artistic director at the National Black Theater since 2012 under the leadership of CEO Sade Lithcott. He is a founding member of the collaborative producing organizations Harlem 9, Black Theater Commons, the Jubilee, Next Generation National Network, and the Movement Theater Company. McCrory sits on the National Advisory Committee for HowlRound.com and was a member of the original cohort for Art Equity. Regina Taylor is a Golden Globe and NAACP Image Award-winning actress, playwright, director, and activist. She's a graduate of the theater program from Southern Methodist University and currently a Meadows Distinguished Visiting Artist. She is playwright in residence at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis, a 3-year partnership with the National Playwright Residency Program, funded in collaboration with the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and HowlRound Theater Commons. This evening's moderator, Carl Sylvestre, is currently the Director of Development at Theater Forward, a membership organization of 19 prominent regional theaters. Prior to joining Theater Forward, Carl worked with numerous arts and social service nonprofits, both in staff positions and in his consulting practice, including the Metropolitan Opera, St. Anne's Warehouse, the Studio Museum in Harlem, New York Theater Workshop, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. Carl has an MBA from the University of Glasgow Adam Smith Business School, an MA in Theater History from Hunter College, and a BA in Comparative Literature and Culture from Columbia University. I'm pleased to invite Mr. Sylvestre to welcome our panelists.
Good evening and welcome all. My name is Carl Sylvestre and I'm with Theater Forward in New York City. Thank you, Dr. Gretchen Smith, Ms. Regina Taylor, and the team at SMU for the wonderful meal that we as participants in this discussion are virtually sharing. This is a Black bone china dinner. It is quite special to have Blackened food or Black soul food served on Black ceramic plates and bowls made by fine arts students at SMU. And although we cannot be physically together, we are thankful to be able to be part of this communion. So now each one of us will tell you about the food that we are having, or we just had. And I will start by saying that my meal came from Red Rooster in Harlem. And I started with wild chicken wing, followed by jerk salmon. And my dessert is salted caramel donuts with sweet potato cream and raspberry lime jam. And it is quite wonderful. So who would like to share next?
Well, I can say I had basically, my name is Jonathan, that I had the exact same meal as you, Sylvester, and it was quite lovely because we're both in Harlem. We're both both in New York. I'm in Harlem, and it was a great meal. So shout out to Red Rooster for providing such a wonderful meal on this beautiful china.
Robert Barry Fleming here from Actors, and I had the great pleasure of having food from Fumi's Cafe. Some beef sambusas, vegetable goat stew, and I will be having some chocolate, double layered chocolate cake for dessert.
Oh.
I am Nataki Garrett, and I am in Ashland, Oregon. And so my meal was delivered from Masala, which is an Indian restaurant. And I had lamb and rice and some garlic naan. And for dessert right now, I'm going to be having a double layer chocolate and cream cake from Mixed.
For dinner, I had one of my favorites, and it's a sentimental favorite, from Sweet Georgia Brown's in Dallas, Texas. It's the food that I grew up on. Some blackened ribs, some black-eyed peas and greens. I made my own dessert. It is reminiscent of my grandmother who worked at the Adolphus Hotel here in Dallas, Texas. It was one of the largest hotels in Dallas at that time. I did a fruit salad. I did a kind of ambrosia, as it were. So I mixed some chocolate with some whipped cream and added some berries, blackberries, some blueberries, some dark grapes, and a few strawberries.
Wow. I think we've been treated very well tonight. So, so now let's get to the business at hand. So thank you all again for joining us. Tonight's conversation, art, activism, and technology. The intersection between art, activism, and technology can be seen as a kaleidoscope in which our lives are viewed from different angles. From this perspective, the calendar year 2020 is one where it felt like where everything crashed. It was arguably a year of change, and very few of us escaped the trauma of the past 12 months. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an immediate and severe impact on the financial health of our local arts organizations and individual artists. The murders of George Floyd, Regina Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others brought to the surface a racial reckoning across the United States. Meanwhile, new and exciting technological tools are providing artists with new avenues to tell their stories and ours. We are now in an era where an individual and collective voices have the potential to be heard in so many different guises globally. Indeed, I say that we're acutely aware we share a small planet called Earth. As we enter the third decade of the 21st century, we can argue that the times, they are changing, but on some levels, some things are not changing. At the heart of the topic of our conversation this evening, art, activism, and technology, for me, a common denominator which unites these three words is hope. Artists often are the leaders to help us see a world that we cannot yet see. Artists help us understand where we have been, shape our current narrative, and help us create a better future. So with that in mind, I have the pleasure this evening to be in the company of four outstanding theater artists who will share their views on our times through the lens of their art, their activism, and how they see technology as a tool helping them advance our common humanity. So let us start by asking each one of our panelists the following question. Using a specific example from your recent work or activities, talk to us about how your art making or activism and how that has been modified in the past year. Jonathan is smiling.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So I can say that so at National Black Theater, a place where I have really where I've been at for 9 years, the way that technology has intersected and actually blossomed, the ways in which we are activists or the way in which we activate our community is through a series that we did inspired by Shirley Chisholm, the life and legacy of Shirley Chisholm, called Unbought and Unbossed, Reclaiming Our Vote. It was a series of 6 commissions by Black women centered around the concept of what does it mean to reclaim? What does it mean to actually have, it's so interesting listening to your intro, and it made me ask the question, what is needed for a rebirth? What is necessary for a reckoning to happen? And when I think about this convergence of what COVID-19 has done, what the murder of George Floyd, how that unleashed, I asked myself what rebirth was able to happen in that shutdown. what kind of convergence was able to rub up against each other. If friction is necessary to create a diamond, what diamond do we get to actually have the opportunity to hold and helm? And through this series, we were able to give and provide and help to deepen our connection to freelance artists in a new kind of way, allowing them to have the tools to really see themselves in a dominant space of being the author and curator of their own destiny, giving them money and a fee and a budget to basically be their own CEO. What does that mean? What does that look like? And I think that that's a powerful concept for many freelance artists to sit with in this moment. And I think that that's what we got to do with this series. We partnered with Michelle Obama's When We All Vote. And through that cross collaboration, which was art and civic engagement, having a discourse with each other, we were able to awaken and enliven our community to understand the importance of voting within this past presidential election. We were able to empower Black women to be at the center of helping to uplift that conversation. And then we were also able to create free and open source kind of materials, because it's still up and running right now. If you were to go on NBT's website or go onto our YouTube page, you could still engage with the work. You can still engage with the conversation. It's allowing for the work and the conversation to live beyond the moment of what we were able to do when we were just doing IRL work. It's allowing for the conversation to live beyond that. And then outside of that, we also curated a series of conversations through a digital program that we have, MBT at Home, where we take the pedagogy of MBT and we translate it to actually go into people's homes, sharing the legacy of what Dr. Barbara Antier created 52 years ago. And this idea of how Black liberation is really for human transformation and centering that pedagogy. So I would say those are some of the ways in which this kind of shutdown, this kind of dwindling, awakened a kind of a rebirth of a consciousness for us to be able to connect in new and I think potentially exciting ways.
Great. Thank you.
You know, you just mentioned one of my favorite books and series about Shirley Chisholm, Unbossed. And yes, that's kind of the release into really bringing theater back to its atavistic roots as a space of civic discourse, of community, recognizing it's not exclusively about diversion, although that it can be a place of great joy in creating that. But the call to action with these two public health crises, certainly in Louisville, with the revelations around Breonna Taylor's shooting and the killing and the grand jury's decision around that, the course of all of that being revealed was very, very sobering, I think, for many of us to witness and experience, and the consequent resistance to pure acceptance of those terms of compromising brown and Black people's civil liberties, and not calling crimes against humanity exactly that when they are witnessed and so blatant. And to have a summer where one is flooded with what happened with George Floyd, with Ahmaud Arbery, Jacob Blake. I mean, it's over and over again, the kind of overwhelm and trauma of that for, I think, so many of us was something that most of us felt like, you know, we had to go to the atavistic roots of what we do as artists and that storytell. And the initial response for us, I think, you know, it was about COVID shutting things down March 12th, you know, coming up on that anniversary, and recognizing that that was shutting down the art. But the revelations that came shortly after that complicated that conversation really led us to having different platforms for storytelling. And at that moment, it was really about, why don't we have a couple of spoken word events with just some of the local folk who just needed to speak on what was going on, and let that be art through that kind of service, to have some panels, unscripted panels with local arts leaders, and have people from all different sectors be in conversation with us through a podcast, and including my sister Nataki, just inviting people into the house to, like, you know, what's on your mind, what's in your heart, what's happening in your brain around these enormous changes that are happening so rapidly, and these incredibly compromising situations that many of us grew up being told, you know, we're in a post-racial, you know, the civil rights movement already happened, and already knowing that that wasn't our own anecdotal experience, but to have it so blatantly kind of coalesce. You know, the word convergence is so apt, Jonathan. It's exactly what we just called our fundraiser and celebration, where we made this pivot to working on a digital platform and continuing to explore emergent technologies as means to have a social enterprise, have art intersect with civil discourse, to have a opportunity to see if there can be a democratization of the art spaces that have been redlined in communities like ours that have a long legacy of plantation capitalism and all the vestiges of that kind of threaded throughout your practice, your interactions, your day-to-day. All of that has given us a chance to be, I think, far more authentically engaged with those conversations and the generative conflict those conversations can engender both in art and civic discourse. And it's been, as Jonathan has expressed eloquently, a very exciting moment, a moment of opportunity and innovation that I think very few of us are, you know, never waste a good crisis. I was reminded getting up this morning, this is the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of my mother's passing. And it was so early in the pandemic, it was hard to know if that was COVID related. It was not identified as such, but it was such a chaotic time, you know, such a chaotic time. I, to this day, have that woman's ashes in that chest over there because we've not been able to have a funeral to bury her in Maryland yet. So it's been such a traumatic and at the same time, and sobering and at the same time enlightening and year, and a moment to really take stock of really understanding what it means to be an artist, what it means to be a leader, what it means to be connected with your various communities. And it's been both traumatic and also really elevating, and an oddly beautiful year in seeing all that has come out of it.
Oh, thank you for that perspective. So that's it. I'm going to move on to Nataki, and please share with us your thoughts on this.
Yes, and thank you for all of those memories, Robert. I feel like you and I have been on this sort of intertwining journey since a TCG conference in 2018, I think it was, which feels like ages ago now, or 2019, I don't remember. It was a while back. So a lot has changed at OSF, and you know, when you open 5 shows on March 6th all at once, all in the same, you know, couple of days, and then you have to close all 5 of those shows 6 days later, it really does shift you. It shifts everything about what you're doing. You know, OSF is really a machine, and you know, it's like it's a data processor. You put in this idea about what you're supposed to be doing, which is this repertory theater, and then you know, out the output of that is you know, 5 shows stacked on top of each other. And there's something about that is like that is codified, and it is clear, and the lines are drawn, and you do not mess with those lines. You know, you just input and output, right? And I'm not saying that beautiful art hasn't happened here. I'm saying that the process for me in my very first year here, from the very beginning, felt like there was something arresting about it. And having, you know, directed a play here, I had an experience, you know, where I was sort of brought through these ideas about no. So I thought to myself, I don't know, after having to raise the resource to be able to know that we would make it through to the other side of this pandemic, which is what which was a revolution all by itself. In this body, it was a revolution. I made a point to refocus my energy on the artists, to be able to ask a simple question in a revolutionary way to artists. What do you want to do? I have resource, you have a brain trust, and you have imagination, and you have access to a way of distilling what our experience has been. And we need you to help us understand why we've survived and how we can continue to survive. And so one of the first things I did was I asked theater artist and director Sharifa Ali to come in and do a residency. She was here. She decided to camp out here in Ashland for the time at the beginning of the pandemic, because New York was really going through the worst of it at that very beginning of this, if you all remember. And she made a film, and so I'm an executive producer of a film. The film is called Ashland, and it looks at using these sort of landscapes and spaces as a place for healing. And if you go on our website, there's a catchphrase at the end of the description that says, "We Black, we in Oregon, look at us." And there's something about that that's extremely revolutionary in Southern Oregon, in a state that used to be a sundown state, in a town that was a sundown town, in which we were not welcomed or invited to be here. You pass through here to get to someplace else. And the original, creation of this state on this stolen land was really a space in which Black people were not supposed to exist. So there's the evocation of that in these spaces. We launched our online digital program called O. And just to be clear, O was not a response to COVID. We were planning on launching it sometime probably this year. But because I conceived it before I got the job, actually. But O has become this sort of bridge for our communities and our constituencies, both the ones that we know and the ones that we don't, to remain connected to OSF. And we've had to actually find what is right for those communities. We're in 60 countries, we have, millions and millions and millions of minutes of views, 10,000 weekly views, and we're making a global impact. And that's mostly because we shifted a lot of our, online, your programming is different. And so we have a project called Womb, which is a creation of joyful space where folks come together to share and create. It features the work of queer BIPOC independent artists. We just did a panel called Black Femme Leading, where we brought together an amazing panel of women leaders from across the field of theater to talk about what it means to be a Black woman who is leading. We're going to start a curation series that'll be panels and panel discussions with artists from all aspects of art making, from fine art to performance art to performing arts, all of it. And that series will start sometime after Juneteenth. We launched a project called the Black Realities Grant, which is a collaboration with the organization now is called Artisan, but it was called Kaleidoscope at the time. And it funds these micro grants to Black artists who work in the VR and AR world. So we just sort of shifted the way that we did our work, but we also shifted the kind of content and the kind of ways in which we were engaging with artists. One of the very first projects that hasn't completed yet was called COVID-19, and each of the letters of COVID is an acronym. Of course, I can't remember what all of those words stand for now, but we commissioned 19 artists to respond to this idea of what does it mean to do this art practice now in this new paradigm, because the moment COVID hit our shores, everything shifted. And so we're asking artists to tell us, what it is that we're doing. And for an organization as old as OSF, 85 years old, and as traditional as OSF, traditional white audiences, tradition of Shakespeare, which is supposed to be some sort of institution, tradition. It is kind of revolutionary to step back and just say, hey, artist, what do you want to do? How would you like to respond to this time? Whether or not you fit into our machinery, I actually would prefer for you to do something outside of the machine. And that's what we're doing.
That's quite a lot. So thank you, Nataki. Regina, please share.
Yes, I'm inspired by each of you in talking about what you've been doing over this last year, the adjustments that we've had to make during this last year, and how we do adapt, how we do continue to move forward and move art forward, embracing. It seems that we've been pushed into technology in some cases, but certainly embracing that which we need to embrace, questioning what we need to fight to hold on to, but learning what we need to learn along the way together. A convergence is interesting to me. It is with COVID, I was trying to figure where I need to sit down. And someone who's on a plane every month, I had to consider that really hard. I decided to be at my mother's house. My mother passed away in 2005. So here I am today at her table. I packed a bag for a month, figuring I'll be here maybe a couple of months. And it is a year later to be here in her home with her garden. Those flowers that she planted are still growing, Mr. Robert, to speak to her and others, transplants that she put out there with my grandmother's flowers, others' flowers. I can commune with those spirits, knowing where I come from. My mother, who taught me how to write children's books at the age of 4, because she was a teacher and wanted to implant in me the idea of owning oneself, naming oneself, writing your own script in this world as others have already written your script before you were even born. That was empowering. So how do we continue to create? How do we, in this instance, talking to SMU, how do we continue to teach? How do we continue to connect during this time when we are in COVID isolation? Certainly, I chose the right place to be in isolation, and I got kind of like used to it, a kind of a hermit over the last year, going, okay, I can do this for a couple of more years. I like this. I'm an only child. I can do this. I'm a writer. I'm introverted. So I got like all sorts of people like up in here. I need to continue to connect and make sure that I do. And over the last year, I've been having these interesting conversations with people that are friends, and you kind of like take it for granted, and you call every once in a while, these really intense conversations, having funerals online, having birthdays online, having this past year, I've been writing 4 online presentations, and that's been continuous. Whether that was a piece called Resistance that I did in New York, whether that was a piece about voting, which I invited people under 21 to write pieces about voting, what they're voting or not voting in this past election. It started in March with Floyd, with this very incendiary race, political race that we were witnessing or part of. It was all of these eruptions of hatred and violence along the way over this last year. And so many people I had a person that I know and love dearly pass each month. So I was kind of like bracing myself each month, but also not wanting to meet it here, but to embrace whatever might be coming. So to embrace online, how do we figure that? How do we, and starting these resistance plays and inviting people to write, Ms. Nataki, to express themselves, to Loving Kindness is a piece that I did at different venues along the way, including Repertory Theater of St. Louis and now Theater 3 here in Dallas, as well as Planet Connections in New York, inviting various writers in each of these cities to write. How are you getting through this? How do you feel about this? What do you need to say right now to connect with people who are sitting in the dark, waiting for some light, knowing the light is always here somewhere, waiting for to shed, illuminate what you're going through, so people know that they're not alone, has been my mission and purpose this past year, which brings me here to the Black Album mixtape, to talk to SMU about its students, to write a play for its African American students as they have been protesting along the way over this past year, to give voices to them through their work that is authentically theirs, to express themselves. The conversations that we had, and I was really surprised that when we opened, I had never met one of them in person. I was going, oh, I don't know how you occupy space, but I know you intimately now. So there's that other thing that happened then in embracing the technology, is that it's not about, at this moment, it's not traditional theater, it's not film, it's not TV, it is something else, because people say it's not theater, it's something else. And
Yes.
we do adapt along the way, from sitting around the fire telling stories to radio, people gathered around, or a book, or people who could read, and certainly this isolation, this elitist idea of theater. Then the walls are falling down, and you guys are so instrumental in those walls falling down. It is with this program, after the play, it was then, how do I hand this over to the next generation, but also to have this convergence of all generations, 21 and under, 21 and up, should be able to speak on it, what's going on right now, because we need to speak about it right now, because there's so many things shifting right now. The earth is shifting under our feet. We don't know if we're going to fall or fly, but it really is about the individual making some choices in this minute to speak about it, to own it, to try and shape it as we can, the future. To invite people then to express themselves is this platform, to make connection on this platform, to make connection in any way that we can. That has been my mission and purpose. My mother raised me to be of service, and find purpose in that through the work that I've been given.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing those stories with us, actually, all of you. And now I want to go a little bit deeper in terms of something you all alluded to, which is we see you white American theater movement in the past year and other social justice movements are demanding accountability from historically white cultural institutions. Many regional theaters are responding with apologies and promises for change. My question to all of you, and how please jump in, why now, and how deeply embedded are those challenges? Because these are all not new conversations. And so really want to hear from you, what has shifted now, and talk to us about the challenges.
I certainly want to dive right into your question, but I just have to take 2 minutes at the risk of sounding like I'm fanboying. Um, uh, just what Regina had just said about being of service and being like having a sense of that being a life purpose. Um, Regina's one of those figures from I'll Fly Away to when I was in grad school, and she gave me this cup when she was at Alabama Shakespeare Festival, offering her beautiful work, A Night in Tunisia, to Lovecraft Country, to Loving Kindness. She has been a marker in the way that great artists like Paul Winfield, Cicely Tyson, James Earl Jones has been a marker for many of us in terms of what service actually looks like in action. Whether she is working as an interpretive artist, a generative artist, activist, the very fact that she gathered us in this incredible panel to be in the presence of Chris and Nataki, as well as her and you, Carl. That's kind of, to me, like that's just Regina, and always has been. Before I knew Regina, she was mentoring me. In the middle of my career, she was mentoring me. To this day, she mentors me by modeling, by example. And I just want to use that as an entryway to, for me, this is the moment where much of our work is informed by that. The difference between a solidarity statement or a rebranding opportunity, an optics opportunity, an opportunity to be like, I don't want to be caught being wrong. I want to be caught, I want to be on the right side, to what does real impact and action look like? You're looking at, you know, 3 artists there who have always done, not said. They do. And that example is kind of what I'm hoping this moment gives everybody a chance to do, say, what's the difference between saying the right thing and doing the thing that makes meaningful impact. To me, that's the heart of We See You White American Theater. Because so, like, you could racialize any of it, but a good part of it, if you go through the demands, is simply common sense of how you don't exploit and extract, and how you make contribution and you serve as a servant leader. If you want to get hung up on demands, as some with the level of white fragility often do, you would miss the whole point of, here's the model of how you can be of service and how that has been modeled. Jonathan's done work around the extraordinary Adrienne Maree Brown with her emergent strategies. There are so many extraordinary leaders who have been modeling ways that we can be of service collectively. And this is just a moment of people having to make some choices of, do you believe continuing to reify these disparities serves the collective, or, you know, impoverishes it? Because for most of us, it's like, we have no question that kind of the level of disparities in health outcomes, education outcomes, economic outcomes, all of those things continue to impoverish everybody.
Yeah.
Working to diligently starting voter suppression work in Georgia, or in my own state, working to curb the women's rights to their own bodies, and have legislation that confuses healthcare providers of how they can be of service. Like, all of these actions that are just so cyclical, it's like, at some point, people have to figure out, is your narcissistic wound so deep that you cannot provide for those who are coming after you? Because, like, some of us, it's like, I'm 57, I got a good, maybe, I hope I have 30 years, but it's getting ready to be somebody else's party. It can't be about us. When, you know, this is the time to be a servant leader, to give back, make space, create, you know, plant the seeds for the future. Because I'm not, you know, I don't think Martin Luther King was saying, I'm an extraordinary Negro, and this is because I'm just so great that I'm not going to get to the mountaintop. It's like he was modeling.
Yeah.
Just saying that's what all of us get to do. I think the seeds we're planting, I don't think a lot of them are going to flourish in my lifetime, but I do know they are very worth my time and energy because people did that, nameless people that I don't know did that for me, to give me the opportunity to be and do what I get to do. And I hope in 100 years, no one would even think Robert Barry Fleming, but would feel the impact of the things that we're trying to contribute and do. So I've taken too much time, but thank you for this.
You have not taken up too much time. You have said some really beautiful, actually powerful things. I think that, I mean, it's quite, We See You, White American Theater, it was a gift to me because it actually asked me to have a conversation with, in what ways have I produced the monster? In what ways have I contributed? It had me come in and call into myself and say, I might not be a racist, but I can do anti-Blackness work, right? In what ways am I doing anti-Blackness curation, during supporting anti-Blackness thought? In what ways am I contributing to feeding the monster of supremacy and making that monster be primal and center? And where can I find the intimate relationship and vibration with myself to be more human? Not be more Black, not be more all the other words, but be more human, and allowing my cultural specificity to be at the root of that humanness, right? That like we start having a conversation. Like what was so beautiful about what you brought up, Regina, among a lot of other things, was that you helped us to reawaken for me a sensibility of what We See You, what 2020 was for me. It was a calling in of intimacy. How can I turn this virtual thing into the most intimate vibratory frequency? How can I translate myself? Because I'm used to doing it in IRL. I'm used to being right next to the person and giving them a hug and like what that means, that heart-to-heart talk. I'm used to feeling the air shift from a vibratory face because we're in tight spaces. So what does the craft now mean when I can't feel that? But then I have a sensibility of the vibration that comes through my body when when it lands in their system. And I think that that's what We See You allows us to have a conversation with. When we talk about transformation, we want to talk about reformation, we have to have a conversation of, like, for me, the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. And what level are we in the cocoon? Fully breaking every concept of ourselves. The caterpillar doesn't know necessarily what is happening inside the cocoon. They're just doing their nature. So in what ways are we allowing our nature to be about the restructuring of ourselves to create a butterfly that will then, if we think about the butterfly effect, the flapping of our wings can then create tectonic shifts on our planet. Like, and that is just a butterfly, a delicate instrument. It's not an instrument of force, not an instrument that like has brutality on its precipice. It's not an instrument that utilizes violence as a gateway for its capital gain. It is an instrument that says, I just want nectar. Can you provide that? I want to be able to fly for as long as I can. Can you provide that? I want to be able to know what sunlight feels like or wind feels like. Can you provide that? And I think that We See You. I think that this moment of 2020, I think that whenever I talk about 2020, I think that was the year I learned that I had to be my own superhero, right? I had to learn how to be my own superhero in so many ways. And I think the individualistic journey that we've all taken inside of this moment, the powerful sensibility of how that individual actually reverberates as a ripple effect inside of our institutional models, inside of our ways of leadership, that is the gift of 2020. It is a lot of grief inside of it, but that grief is the lemonade that can hopefully wrap us in grace. And so that's what I think about when I think about We See You. That's what I think about when I think about the civic unrest. That's what I think about when I think about all the demands, is that there's a lot of grace that can be codified inside of it. And then we can wrap ourselves inside of the grace algorithm of it. Then we can start to actually have a conversation around transformation, and not just Black transformation, but human transformation through, for me, at National Black Theater, a culturally specific algorithm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to, oh, sorry.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
That my brothers have said before me. And the thing I'll add is, when I was teaching at CalArts, I remember having this moment with a couple of my African-American students who were literally describing going through the same exact kind of violence that I had experienced when I was a student at CalArts. And I had this moment of like, because I'm very good at do my body into the matrix, avoiding your harm. I can figure out ways of shifting my body so that it comes past me, right? But it was at that moment that I realized that every single time I did that, that energy that was coming towards me was still in the world, and that it was hitting generations that came behind me. So it didn't matter what all the things that I thought I was doing as a teacher and a leader, and a mentor at CalArts. The only way I could really make a difference for my students of color, in particular my Black students and my Black women students, just to be very specific, was to actually catch it, was to catch the thing that was coming in my direction, and to be able to hold that for myself. So when the We See White American Theater demands it came forward, the first thing I did was scan it, and I was like, 75% of these things are based on experiences that I had as a freelance director, that I actually had the other day in an email exchange with a producer. 75% of 28 pages of demands are reflecting my lived experience. And so what that galvanizes in me is if I don't do anything else, I have to make sure that the generation of artists that come behind me can't say that this is a part of their lived experience. That it's some, if Woody King could write an article in 1968 saying that these things had to change with Ossie Davis, and we're having the same exact conversation now, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves as a society that continues to perpetuate harm. And like you said, we continue to extract, right? And we extract to extinction, Black bodies in these spaces, and bodies of the global majority in these spaces. And I'm not here for that anymore, So I believe that the We See White American Theater demands for my theater did something completely different than it did for me. I'm with you, Jonathan, and also with you, Robert, that it really was a call-in. How can I make sure I stand in this gap? But for my theater, OSF, amongst the white regional theaters, the historically white and the predominantly white regional theaters, had been known as the kind of flagship theater for this work in equity, diversity, inclusion. There was the first cohort of organizations that worked with Art Equity. Art Equity's brand is based on, in part, some of the work that Carmen Morgan did at OSF. And so I had an expectation when I arrived here in 2019 that a lot of the issues that you might find in other predominantly white organizations had been solved. And boy, was I naive.
Wow.
Because all they had started was the unraveling. And if you use OSF as an experiment, that unraveling is treacherous. And it has really taken its toll on the BIPOC members of my staff, former staff, and we are actually much further along than a lot of my sister theaters, and that is completely on the backs of Black women who stood in that gap here.
Yeah.
So the other thing that We See White American Theater and those demands offered me is, I want to make sure that my theater is a space that does not make Black women into casualties in doing that work. And I could say that 75% of that document is a good manual for me to follow to create a new way of operating, so that I'm not creating casualties out of Black women. And I can say that in this last year, I have a lot of battle scars and wounds, as this system that I am doing this work in sought to create a casualty out of me. So it is actually the ointment. The We See White American Theater demands, that's the ointment that OSF really needs to begin to move us beyond the wounding space into the actual workspace. That's how I see how we could utilize that, and the BTU, what their doctrines are. All of that is really about how we're going to, shift this whole paradigm so that we don't have another generation of casualties.
Yeah, so thank you. Actually, Regina, would you like to, mindful of the time, we just got a 10-minute warning, and we could go on a great deal. we can certainly, simply because we're aware of 10 minutes, it's like, oh, we just started. What does that mean?
Yes, going by too fast.
Way too fast, way too fast. So, Regina, would you like to add more to this?
I think you guys have summoned it. Uh, Summoned it. It is happening in this moment, and the work is happening. The question is, how do we translate this into something that will be lasting? We see these cycles. We've had these conversations. What's happening in this moment is really special. How do we learn from the strategies of the past to move it forward to other outcomes is the question.
Yeah. Well, I started the conversation a little bit this evening about hope, which is something that sort of totally I tried to hold on to a lot during the past year. And so I would be, as a final thoughts, I would like to hear sort of how do you feel about what are your hopes for the future of the American theater?
I was gonna say my hope for the American theater is I have a hope for humanity more so than I think the American theater. I think that I really do hope that that we as humanity tap into, as Nataki was uplifting so beautifully, and also Regina, the feminine vibration that can heal, the mother energy. I'm not talking about women. I'm talking about when I name myself, I am he, him, my spirit is a she. I understand that part of what my gift is that I am tapped in and tuned in to that woman's feminine IG technology that can actually heal. And we all have access to it. And somewhat has created the cyclical nature that we have repeated the past is potentially, when I look at history, we have come from a patriarchal notion of change versus a matriarchal notion of change. And I invite us, as we think of hope as a vibration to lean into, that we lean into the growing courage that is necessary for us to acknowledge that feminine, woman, motherly energy that rests in each of our DNA and allow that to guide some of our decision making.
I'd love to just add to that the matriarchal root of African societies, the diaspora, is also a part in which we can all see our humanity. As a child, I translated every movie from Planet of the Apes to Popeye to, you name it, and I could find my humanity in that. And what I think the challenge for America will be to see itself in its Blackness, because it fully informs this whole continent, everything about the culture, about the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was not a white project. It has roots in many cultures, and a strong matrilineal kind of connection with the motherland is a place of birth for all of us. And there'll be a place that we can claim as something that is we can all learn from and be lifelong learners and students of. And I think to go with Jonathan's in that spirit, that poster on the back of his wall, as James Baldwin say, "I can't believe what you say because I see what you do."
Ashe.
It's the moment for us to do and not just say.
Yes.
And I will just add to that, when the mother is full of life, the number one thing that the mother needs is nourishment. And if you don't nourish the mother, then the mother can't do the act of bringing something to term. That you cannot actually reap the benefit of the mother if there isn't nourishment. And I do hope that my industry and my field recognizes where that source is from, and where that source is from in them, and why they do need to continue to nourish it, because there are people in all kinds of lives, in all kinds of spaces that could really care less about the theater. And that's because the theater has made a point to make sure that we were clear that it didn't care about us. And so that is the mother spirit that has to be nurtured. This moment of invitation, where we are saying, we're beckoning, this is a space for you, but also the moment of preparation where we're creating spaces where people can exist in their full dynamic complexity.
Yes.
This is the mother of our time as a theater industry. And we do have to shift if we are going to survive, if we are going to allow it to come forward fully to term.
Yes.
Yes. This is an incredible moment in time where anything is possible. Anything is possible. And it is in taking this moment for people who have been voiceless to know that they have the power within them to create their own space and find connection with others who are like them, to have some conversations with people who are not like them, to be seen and to be heard. There is, I think we find ways where there are no ways. We always find ways. So this is a very exciting moment.
Yes.
The one thing I wish we could buy was more time. And I really, this is a wonderful conversation. And I think I'm looking at that. Essentially, I think, I would say on behalf of all of us on the panel, Miss Regina Taylor, thank you
Thank
for
you.
bringing us together
Thank
tonight
you.
for this conversation. And it could go on a lot more, and I'm sure it will continue. But thank you for all the work, for the leadership that you're providing for us.
And thank you. Thank each of you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Nataki. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here this evening, having this conversation. It has fed my soul. Thank you.